لين بتخارى مجرم طيلا الآرس نارد آرس أنا إذا أربسرشن أخوني أرباشن صير الخاصي بخيبة من شبن بخيبة هل كل أرخبي بخيبة أني هنا بيتوب مخايني اخنا بيايخوا ما تخوى التبلس اتوالن هيبي ما تخوى باروختا بيدا باروختا اخنا بتخوى الارس خختا جو شقلن الدو مرزة إنا تشلي لخا قزخ جاشوك الله ترجور اللي بلشانة أرسناي أنا إيضا جاشوك الله سلوطة صالبنا خختا جو شقلي أني قرداي بتهاينا عروق من مصدوتي برنجومية خختا جو شقلي إنا أقزخ اندي لتبلي السويسة وتيلي اللايبدية أنا هالعادية ده إيه بات دو قزخ هلين مياسا منشينا دخ أويا خلما قدي
From Urmia to Russia, through Doman, Khoy, and Julfa, move a straggling extension of 15,000 famished Assyrian refugees. The move north is spontaneous and inevitable. They seek help on the Russian side. December 22, 1914, Council Vedensky. This is the report on the Assyrian refugees written by Vedensky, the Russian vice consul in Urmia. World War I. Exodus of Christian peoples from their historic places of habitation. Genocide. Who were the Assyrians? During World War I, many misfortunes and agonies befell the Christian people living in the territory of the Ottoman Empire and northwestern Persia. Those people were Armenians and Assyrians. After the Russian withdrawal from Persia in 1914, a huge number of Assyrian refugees arrived in Tiflis together with the Russian army. The remaining local population endured losses from armed Kurdish tribal marauders. The Russian soldiers went back home, like water spilled on the soil. With the establishment of Bolshevik power in Russia in 1918 and the collapse of the Russian Caucasian Military Front, a large number of Assyrian refugees again moved toward the Caucasus region with the withdrawing Russian army. Many of them originated from the areas of Urmia, in Persia, and from Hakkari in the Ottoman Empire. They fled to Russia by way of Armenia. According to several sources, an estimated 40,000 to 60,000 refugees immigrated to Russia in this period, dispossessed of their homeland, countless Assyrian survivors having endured the horrible experiences of World War I, massacres, famine, and violence, scattered through Transcaucasia and the North Caucasus. A majority settled in the Russian cities of Krasnodar, Novocherkassk, Armavir, Maikop, Lapinsk, and elsewhere. At the beginning of the 20th century, many of them gradually left for Moscow, Leningrad, Kiev, and Kharkov. By 1920, Assyrians living in the territory of the Soviet Union numbered 35,000 to 40,000. The aspiration to enter the Soviet cultural revolutionary movement made the Assyrian people establish self-help cultural institutions, an organization launched in 1924 called the Union of Assyrians in Russia, or Khoyad Atur, New Assyria. It played an essential role for the preservation of Assyrian people in the Soviet Union. Some efforts were launched to get the Assyrian immigrants back to their homeland, particularly to Urmia and Salamas. Many of them had Persian or Turkish passports, which allowed them to depart Russia easily. Malik Kambar, the chief of the Khilu tribe who had fought to protect Assyrians in Urmia, made a trip through the Assyrian refugee communities in Russia to encourage them to return with him to settle in the Assyrian protectorate in Syria under the French mandate. However, at the start of the 1930s, Hayat Atur was reorganized and renamed Hayata, All-Union Association of Assistance to Working Assyrians. Being in operation across the Soviet Union, it opened national schools, launched training courses for teachers, and published books and textbooks in Assyrian. The organization also aimed at the promotion of compact Assyrian communities throughout Russia. Due to these efforts, the Isors received permission to live in the territory of Gelendzhik, which is on the Black Sea. A resort city now, Gelendzhik then did not provide the Assyrian settlers with the essential conditions for earning a livelihood. The agriculturist refugees found the land disappointingly barren. The Hayata, which had branches in many cities of the Soviet Union, advanced its activities during the period of 1925 to 1937.
И вот возникли школы, возник центр Учпедгиз в Москве.
Schools were set up. The Center of Educational Pedagogic Publishing House was formed in Moscow, which prepared school books.
Печатались книги,
Assyrian was interpreted through the Latin letters and books were published.
которых становились
The authors were the brilliant experts of the Assyrian language.
знатоки языка.
At first, the books were written in Latin letters. Later, they were transformed into Russian with supplementations.
Потом перешли на русский алфавит. Были организованы колхозы.
The collective farms, kolkhozes, were set up.
Посадить на землю.
The Assyrians tried to get back to what they did before, which was being farmers.
В прошлом земледельцами как-то оказались в своей среде.
There was just one collective farm set up where Assyrians came to live. The village of Urmia in the Kurganinsk region of the Krasnodar territory was established in 1924. It was built by the refugees originally from Urmia, transplanted to Arazdayan village in Armenia along the Turkish border. During and after World War I, when there was a threat from Turkey to occupy the Transcaucasian countries, Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan, the people of Urmia Arazdayan village fled to Kuban by way of Georgia. At first, they resettled in Lubinsk and other neighboring Cossack villages called Stanitsas and Cossack farms, known as Hooters.
Когда появилась возможность, ассирийцы переехали несколько семей в станицу Константиновскую.
At the first opportunity, the Assyrians came to the Cossack village of Konstantinovsk. The Cossacks provided the Assyrians with land plots near the river of Senyucha, where the village of Urmia was formed.
Турецкой войны 913 года.
After the war, the next stream of Assyrian refugees from Turkey appeared in our village. They bought houses and became neighbors with the local Assyrians living in the Terskian Cossacks farm.
Рядом с проживающими здесь ассирийцами хутора терских казаков.
Land plots near the Novo Alexivskaya farm were given to the Assyrian refugees who formed a hooter in that place and named it Urmia. The settlement had an estimated 50 to 70 Assyrian families who later were joined by many compatriots from Moscow and Leningrad. A primary school was set up. For the Assyrian people, this tiny area in Kuban became a piece of their homeland. At the end of the 19th century, there was an Assyrian community of 200 people in Armavir, which was a little town then. Starting from the 1880s, Persian Assyrians had come to Armavir in search of jobs. They worked as shoeblacks, porters, and unskilled laborers in brick processing plants. They were certainly also well-to-do Assyrians among them.
По составленному членами самой общины по семейному списку.
According to the family list constituted by the Assyrian community, there were 262 Assyrians living here in 1909. A number of sources and documents verify that by World War I, there were Assyrian communities in the Kuban region, particularly in the cities of Armavir, Yekaterinodar, and Novorossiysk, and other settlements in our region. Each of these communities had its own way of life and were distinguished from its neighbors.
Община ассирийцев, которая была достаточно самобытна и отличалась от своих соседей.
The houses where the Assyrians used to live have tumbled down now. After World War I, many new refugees settled in Armavir. This town soon became the center of Assyrian national and cultural development. In 1925, an Assyrian school under the direction of permanent schoolmaster Rabbi Ushana Bedroev was opened in this building. Due to this man's painstaking efforts, an Assyrian department was launched at the Armavir Pedagogical Technical School, where teachers were trained for national schools. A great number of Assyrians scattered across Russia, Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan came here to train. As a result, a new generation of excellent intellectuals emerged in national cultural life. Assyrian people gradually started moving into Soviet society. They found a reliable shelter here to spread the seeds of national enlightenment and revive Assyrian culture and traditions. However, misfortunes would follow this nation again. The victims would be ordinary people, irrespective of their nationality or engagement, even people loyal to the Stalin regime. The political repressions between 1937 to 1938 took place throughout the Soviet Union under the slogan, "To strengthen state power and eradicate the capitalist remnants in the people's consciousness, we must destroy the class enemy." The Soviet government uprooted dissidents, enemies, and antagonists. According to the decree passed by the government at the end of 1937, former Iranian and Turkish subjects living in the Soviet Union were condemned to repressions on the basis of the following two articles: execution or 10 years in labor camps. Stalin's repressions affected the Assyrian intellectuals as well.
Практически в каждой большой ассирийской семье есть репрессированные, есть расстрелянные родственники, сосланные.
Almost each large Assyrian family has victims of the Soviet repressions, those who have been shot, exiled, or become invalids. At the end of the 1930s, particularly in the period between 1937 and 1938, the repression started throughout the Soviet Union.
Искореняло, зачищало практически всех инакомыслящих, тех, кого она.
The Soviet government uprooted all the dissidents who were believed to be Soviet enemies and antagonists. Both educated and illiterate Assyrians were condemned to repression.
Хотя и немного среди них было интеллигенции, ассирийцы подверглись таким репрессиям. И простые ассирийцы, и образованные ассирийцы.
Many Assyrians who were arrested were illiterate in Russian and could not understand the cause of their arrest. A shoeblack was falsely accused of grievous faults, planning terror attacks against the communist power and engagement in intelligence services working against the Soviet government. Confessions, as a rule, were forced through violence. Among the arrested people were teachers, doctors, military men, heads of collectives and cooperative farms, peasants, workers, and others. Many women replaced their missing husbands at workplaces and raised their children alone. The orphans were given a horrible label. They were considered children of the nation's enemies. The people lived in fear as so-called Black Crow. The patrol of the National Committee of Interiors might stop at their home any night and take away a family member.
Из 10 арестованных в это время
Several of the 10 arrested Assyrians were shot eventually. The rest were sent to labor camps, where many of them died.
срок
Many were deported from the Soviet Union. Families were split. The husbands, who were Iranian subjects, might have been exiled from the Union, while their families might have stayed in the country.
семьи, какой-то муж иранско подданный мог быть выслан, а семья оставалась в России и навсегда не расставались.
Families broke up. Inexorable fate struck women as well. In 1936, Vardi Timiryazeva, whose maiden name was Bakuzova, was the head of the Mikoyan collective farm in Urmia, Hudar. In 1938, she was arrested with her husband. Later, they both were shot. Her 3 children were left orphans. The little one was only 9 months old. Vardi's sister took care of the orphans. Ten Assyrian women were shot as a result of absurd accusations.
Вот эта тетя моя, Тимирязева Варди, ее репрессировали.
This is my aunt, Timiryazeva Vardi. She was the head of the Assyrian collective farm in Urmia, in Krasnodar territory. She was repressed together with her husband. Her 2 5- and 9-year-old children became orphans, left in Urmia village.
И 7-летний сын остались сиротами в Урмии.
Raiza Ayvazova and Arthur Bakuzov are cousins. They live in the city of Rostov-on-Don. Their families had to endure repressions, exile, and war. They devotedly preserved the story of their family through these photos.
Во время репрессий отца выслали в Казахстан, Жамбульскую область.
During the repressions, my father was exiled to Kazakhstan. My aunt, uncle, and grandmother were deported to Iran. However, after World War II, my father managed to come to Novocherkassk and take my mom with him to Kazakhstan. I was born there. In 1960, we moved to Iran, and then 4 years later, in 1968, we returned to Novocherkassk, where we lived for a year and a half. In 1970, we moved to live in Rostov.
Взял мою маму, и они опять уехали в Казахстан. Там я вот родился. Брат у меня родился, и сестра родилась.
Hello, my dear mom, Pavlik and Sarah. Sorry that I haven't written to you all this time. I did not know whether I would stay here or be sent to another place. Now we are here, as we have always been here. Later they might take us to another place. Mom, I think you know that I am sentenced to 5 years of exile, as the special consultation court decided. Every time I sit down to write to you, I get upset and cannot go on. Now we work in the forest. It is a very hard work. The food is not sufficient, so we are hungry all the time. It is dark when we go to work, and it is dark when we come back. Mom, write to me about how you live there. How is Pavel? Is he well behaved, or is he the same? How is Sarah? My dear brother Pavel, I have only one request of you. Listen to Mom, because you are the only male left there, and all hope is on you. Goodbye, and warmest kisses to you all. Your son and brother, Avdej. Sarah was 13 when she received this letter from her exiled brother. Their family lived in the city of Novocherkassk, or Cherkez, as it was called by the Assyrians. After World War I, a large number of Assyrians moved here. They earned their living by cultivating grapes in orchards on land they rented. Sarah's father, Yakub Lazarev, an ordinary horticulturist, and her brother Barber Avdej Lazarev were arrested in 1937. Father Yakub Lazarev was later shot. There was no news on Avdej. They got only a short note on the cause of Yakub Lazarev's death. He died of lung inflammation. Still later, in the 1960s, the family received notice of their rehabilitation. The family of Sarah's husband was exiled to Kazakhstan. Sarah and her young children followed the exiles. In 1948, they returned to Novocherkassk. Sarah is 84 years old now and continues to live in Novocherkassk. All her relatives and friends are buried at the town cemetery. Only letters, photos, and memories remain. This is the Levashov wasteland. Residents of Leningrad, men and women of different nationalities, who were executed, rest here. They are the victims of the Stalin regime. The silence and the sound of the raindrops tell us the tragic story of these people. There are also Assyrian names on the tombstones. Shlovsky, a Russian writer and a commissar of the provisional government in the Caucasus Front, described Azers in his book, A Sentimental Journey. After World War I, he met his Azor friend, Lazar Zervandov, in Leningrad. Years before, he had been the commander of the Assyrian Horse Artillery, which was under the command of Russia's Caucasian army in northern Persia. At the time when Shlovsky met Lazar again, he was polishing shoes in Leningrad. Many of Shlovsky's Azer friends had become shoeblacks in Moscow and Leningrad. In 1938, Lazar and many others were shot by the Bolshevik government. But the killings of Assyrian officers and soldiers of the Russian army had started back in the 1920s. Freydun Aduraya, a talented poet, doctor, and a daring patriot, was one of the first victims. His life was dedicated to developing and spreading the national ideology among Assyrian people. Dr. Freydun was arrested in 1926. He was accused of espionage and was shot in the fall of the same year. Such misfortune befell other Assyrian national leaders and ideologists. This is how Soviet power beheaded the Assyrian nation. On June 22, 1941, German forces swept into the Soviet Union. The Great Patriotic War had begun. The terror aimed at the Soviet people appeared set aside, as Stalin now needed patriots to protect the homeland. Many children, once labeled children of the nation's enemies, were recruited as volunteers and now perished for their so-called homeland. Like every nationality within the Soviet Union, the Assyrians also were included in the war. Several became officers, generals, and heroes. More than 2,500 Assyrians were killed during the Patriotic War, a large price for such a small community. Ivan Vardoev is an immigrant from the village of Arsny in the Republic of Armenia. He has lived in Krymsk for 15 years. 3 of his cousins went to the front and never came back. They learned that one of them, Sergei, died near Krymsk. When Vardoev's family moved to Krymsk, they found the 2 brothers, named Sergei and Nikolai, on a monument dedicated to the perished soldiers. They both had become officers. Through the efforts of Ivan Vardoev, the war memorial had been refurbished. Now his remaining wish is to find trace of his 3rd brother, Efrem Vardoev. In 1943, a perilous battle took place near Krymsk, which was under German siege then. The siege broke in August 1943 after the Red Army took the offensive. Pavel Pavlisov was wounded in the battle and sent to the military hospital of Krasnodar. He fought throughout the entire war, from Batumi to Warsaw, engaged in numerous battles, received several wounds. Today, at the Krasnodar Veterans Hospital, Pavlisov is undergoing a medical examination. His friend Nikolai Tumasov, also an Assyrian veteran of the war, has come to visit Pavlisov. Nikolai was recruited in 1941 when he was 17. He served in a field engineer battalion. They built roads and dug trenches for the front. Nikolai and Pavel fought in different divisions and lived in different republics in Armenia and Azerbaijan. Years later, they met in Krasnodar. Now, since both reside in Krasnodar, they meet regularly to talk about life and their difficult past, about the war, divisions, and brother soldiers.
Нас пересадили ночью на корабль «Красную Грузию» и военной, и направили в сторону Новороссийска.
We boarded a military ship at night called Red Georgia and headed to the city of Novorossiysk. Before getting to Novorossiysk, we met 2 hostile ships, a submarine, and 2 airplanes. We thought they were Soviet, but they were Nazi. They started bombing us. Our ship barely approached to the seaside, and we swam to the seashore.
Корабль отошел где-то ближе к берегу, мы кинулись в воду, и так оказались мы на берег, и попали мы в пехоту.
А вот был приказ Сталина.
By Stalin's order, the national minorities in the Soviet Union had to serve in the home front.
Только чтобы они работали в тылу, в рабочем батальоне, а на фронт прямой, чтобы не были. Это не касалось.
На это
I didn't know about it.
даже не знал и не пользовался этим. Нет.
Many Assyrian soldiers never came back from the war. They fought for their so-called homeland, the Soviet state. In 1949 to 1950, many Assyrians again were exiled to Siberia and Kazakhstan. In the same time span, a number of Assyrians from Georgia were also banished. so was all of the Assyrian population from the Azeri town of Kanlar. The process was efficient and simple. The exile families were rounded up by truck, taken to the railway station, loaded into freight wagons that carry them on the many days' journey to Siberia. Each wagon was crammed with an estimated 9 or 10 families. Upon arriving in Siberia, they discovered the reason why they had been exiled. All were former citizens of Turkey and Iran, and thus determined to be guilty of espionage.
Морозы были 40 градусов, мы их легко переносили. А летом невозможно было. Комары.
We easily endured severe conditions at negative 40 degrees Celsius. It was harder in the summers. There were lots of mosquitoes and gadflies. Over those 7 years, we wore pants, not common for women at that time. It was simply impossible to get along without pants, especially when we were in the forest. We were walking along a river for half a month. We would sleep whenever it got dark. The tarpaulin boots became our pillows. The quilted jackets were our mattresses, and the headscarves were used as our blankets. We had no days off. We had to work even if we were sick. We worked from 7 a.m. until it was pitch black.
И работали от 7 до уже пока свет есть, пока уже что-то видишь, ты должна работать.
In his memoirs, Ilya Vartanov, an Assyrian journalist, reveals the harsh life of Assyrians in Siberia. Assyrians are traveling on the freight cars through the Siberian taiga, Sava, Jammu, Lazar, Sargon, Gavril. There is nothing more nonsensical, more incompatible and exclusive than these two things. Assyrians and Siberia. And now, 35 years after the dreadful escape from Turkey, Assyrian people deprived of their homes became the victims of injustice again. In their first years of exile in Siberia, many Assyrians, unable to survive the brutal winters, hard work, and inhumane living conditions, died of various diseases. Over time, the survivors gradually adjusted to the new climate and Siberian life. Many exiles grew vegetables, bred pigs and cows. It is rumored that some of them even miss their Siberian life now. The exiles were set free after Stalin's death. Some of them returned to Kanlar, the others to Kuban. They had endured everything from genocide to exile. So the Azers, uprooted from their historic home, took shelter in the territory of Russia. Here they built their new life and shared all the misfortunes of the local people and more. If Azores lived in the Volga and suffered from hunger, they would have left that place and reached India. Because Azores are a great nation. Shlovsky. There came the thaw. Assyrians became successful as professionals and integrated into Russian culture. Now they speak poor Assyrian and do not feel the need to return to their historic homeland. Today, at the dawn of the 21st century, after 2 world wars, the socialist revolution, and the collapse of the Soviet Union, many still live in Russia. Moscow, the capital of the Russian Federation. There are approximately 10,000 Assyrians living in Moscow. Many of them are from former Soviet republics such as Armenia, Georgia, and others. According to a recent census, the Assyrian population in Moscow was 3,196 in 1989. According to several unofficial sources, the population today, 20 years later, fluctuates between 8 to 15,000. Assyrians used to live in these houses. Their dark-haired children used to play in these yards. This is where traditional festivals of a religious nature used to be held. They were commemorations to venerated saints. The elder Assyrians, the original refugees who fled here during World War I, are not with us any longer. Today, they are remembered as the keepers of the national aspirations and traditions. They retained the national spirit, which survived and was established in Russia after the cruel winds of destiny. Unfortunately, their subsequent generations lack for that spirit today. It's October 1st. The Moscow Assyrians celebrate the feast day of Saint Shalita, one of the revered saints of the Assyrian Church of the East. Patriarchal Church was named for Mar Shalita. It stood in the village of Kuchanis in the Hakkari region of the Eastern Ottoman Empire, where the residence of the Assyrian spiritual leader Patriarch Mark Shimun was located. It is said that the Church of Saint Shalita still stands in Kuchanis, but there is no patriarch there anymore. Neither is his flock anywhere near. It is scattered all over the world. At the threshold of the Moscow club Kino, Assyrian musicians, dressed in their national costumes, meet the guests with surna and davul, drum. Moscow air is filled with Assyrian music from these traditional instruments. The celebration follows the typical scenario: folk dances, congratulations, and dinner. Thanks to the efforts of the Assyrian activists, this magnificent church of the Virgin Mary Miriam of the Assyrian Church of the East was erected in Moscow's Dubrovka neighborhood. The foundation of the church was laid in 1995. Vyacheslav Ilyushin, the leader of the church's religious community, provided the plot from his own land for construction of the church. He also took care of all the administrative and bureaucratic issues. He journeyed to North Iraq to choose the architectural style for the new Matmariam church and explored Assyrian monuments and churches in Iraq for design inspiration. Many leading Assyrian entrepreneurs contributed funds toward the construction of the church. Every Sunday, services are held at Matmariam Cathedral Church. The church celebrates all the Assyrian religious holidays. There is a Sunday school at the cathedral. Native language classes are held. Vyacheslav Ilyushin. Plans to build a cultural center and a museum as well. The models have already been prepared. There are a number of Assyrian cultural organizations registered in Moscow. However, many of them function haphazardly. Recently, youth unions have been set up, where new viewpoints and strategies are discussed. The Assyrian Association of Hadyata in Moscow has operated since 1988. Certain issues must be discussed with the Hadyata management, such as the continuation of the Kalla Aturaya radio program and publication of an Assyrian newspaper. Today, it is hard to find Assyrian shoeblacks, those small, dark people who used to sit at the corners of Russia with the shoe brushes. They are as old now as the cobblestones on the sidewalk. Those were the Icers, the Assyrian Highlanders. Alexei Ivazov still owns a cobbler's booth on the Avenue of Veterans in St. Petersburg. His father, also a shoeblack, entered the army in 1941. He left only 3 rubles for his family's upkeep. Alexei had to take his father's job to provide for his family. 3 years later, he joined the army as well. Since the post-war years, he has continued to work as a cobbler. Not much has changed in what he does. It was just polishing before. Now it is shoemaking also. There is a large community of Assyrians in the south of Russia. They are more organized and better prepared for heritage maintenance. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, many Assyrian families from former Soviet republics moved to the Krasnodar territory and Rostov region. The Assyrian population in Krasnodar is about 4,000.
Каждый въехавший так или иначе несет на себе печать того места, где он родился, вырос.
Every immigrant, somehow or other, carries the influence of the place where he was born, brought up, educated, and lived. That means he bears certain customs and traditions. I'm talking about the elder generation. In a way, it brings about some difficulties in integration of Assyrian people into new environments, where there are people of different nationalities, mainly Russians, with their distinctive way of life. I think we should work very hard on young Assyrians who are growing up today to make them united and complete as the Assyrian people. To achieve this goal, we must spread propaganda on popularization and activation of the national traditions, culture, history, language, and music.
Активизацию применения всех национальных традиций, культуры, истории, языка, музыки.
People of various nationalities live in Krasnodar. A wave of national pride arose in the 1990s with hopes of preserving national traditions and culture. At first, the Association of Assyrians in Kuban was set up, which later reorganized into Hadyata, the autonomous unit of Kuban Assyrians. Every ethnic group living in Kuban is associated within its own nationality community. Each ensembles regularly at the Center of National Cultures in Krasnodar city. In this building, there is a collection of traditions, histories, and cultures representing the national minorities living in Kuban. Hadyata is one of the founders of the center and thus has a large role in planning the activities of the center. Hadyata's goal is to maintain and revive national traditions, the study of the Assyrian language, and the strengthening of relations between Russian Assyrians and Assyrians abroad. Hadyata's current activities are being discussed as a regular meeting of the board. Alla Georgizova, maiden name Babiloeva, is full of patriotism and inexhaustible energy. Since 1986, Alla and her husband Oleg Georgizov have run a musical troupe for young people to popularize and spread Assyrian dances and music among Russia's Assyrians.
شتت ألبو جمو سوي أخنا تخملن إتخ خدنا دستت راكاد برشخ جانا بغرابة جيل شو اللي شبصرت منصر شن ياسور جميلان كت يلبخ ليشانا كت يلبخ رقدة سويداي كبوت هذا بديد أنا هج خملي ببدا موت رقدة فالون آتوراي شابيرة موت مرياي تفالون Хоч легко буде басуйра. Ади уже вирна кляйшин.
Through her dance group, she has educated hundreds of Assyrian children. She has organized almost every cultural activity and festival within the Assyrian community of Krasnodar, as well as participation at various regional and territorial festivals and tours. Today, Allah still works enthusiastically with young Assyrians. The Assyrians of Kuban are great fans of sports, soccer especially.
Уже более 16 лет существует у нас ассирийская команда в городе Краснодаре. Под именем была Хаята, а теперь преобразована в Ниневию.
It's been more than 16 years the Assyrian football team is in function in the city of Krasnodar. It was called Hayata before, now it's named Nineveh. Besides that, in Urmia, we have always had a football team. Urmia, which plays in the regional championships and always wins. A new football team was formed in the city of Krimsk 2 years ago. We will have 5 football teams. Teams from Rostov have been invited to take part in the tournaments. We have been promised to have guests from Ukraine next year. Moscow has also promised that it will take part in the tournament, though they have never fulfilled their promise so far. So we try to consolidate the youth in the following spheres: culture, traditions, and sports.
Пока все это обещание. То есть мы продолжаем молодежь консолидировать в 2 направлениях. Это культура, традиции и спортивное направление.
Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the religious life of Russian Assyrians revived as did that of their neighbors. Many religious confessions received permission to build places of worship for their own congregations. The Assyrians of Krasnodar were also allowed to erect an Assyrian church of the East, which would serve the Assyrian community. Assyrians have a wonderful tradition to build a church cooperatively, with contributions from the entire community. That is exactly what happened in Krasnodar. Assyrians from different sites came together, taking an active role in the construction of the church.
Avivalan umra juda mendita kat btkhab daikh kat chul khayan kha ita khumitola aha umta من دور الشنة تيلم طيلا دانا كجدا ملشويتا إذن يفلون كمطرسة طمران كبتختت السيطة إيتا شتت ألبو تصمو تشيشوا يواخون آها قطت أبرا آها أرى كبنيتت أمرا آتوكات راية شل هيويان لكتا تشانشالت ديان بيواني خاشا برتا تونتا جدا من ديتا وبخادروانو شلكوبان كت آها أرى آها أمرا تشانشالتنا تخمانتا كت ملت تديان كت تخمونخ كت لامي تاني لابهشراني بيواني خا زروتا أزروتا بيواني خا مكيمتا خا بيوا خا خورتا كاتن كت منبارن أتيانه يعطيني كت فيد خسباي شولا سبب أني شويشن جدا ملشيتا لتفعل نيزنا من دي ودخفله.
Many Assyrian funders contributed to the building. The Church of Mar Gevargis will soon open its doors to worshippers. The fact that Assyrians lived compactly in Urmia village created favorable ground for the preservation of their language and traditions. 70% of the 280 families in Russian Urmia are of Assyrian heritage. The rest are Armenians and Russians. Optional lessons on Assyrian language and history are included in the curriculum of the village school, where roughly 100 children study. Following a successful petition to the regional government, Assyrian studies will be included in the regular school curriculum as well. The school has soccer teams for different age groups. Soccer games have always been encouraged in Urmia. Various theatrical plays in this club were once performed by Urmian amateur artists. Today, a series of theater programs have been revived by young Urmian actors. Alexander Tamrazov is the director of the Urmia National Dance Ensemble. The village's youth often gather in this club to enjoy disco party. In the center of the village stands a memorial to the victims of the Great Patriotic War as a way of honoring the fathers, brothers, or grandfathers who perished for their so-called homeland. The villagers are mostly occupied with providing for their households. They keep domestic animals and grow vegetables.
В общем-то, ухудшилась экономическая ситуация в Урмии, когда, если сравнивать с прошлыми годами, то где-то с начала 60-х годов Урмия.
The economic situation worsened in Urmia at that time. In the summers of the 1960s, Urmians started intensively growing vegetables, providing half of Russia with vegetables, particularly with Bulgarian peppers. This process in vegetable growing was due to a technique the Assyrians applied. They used the old method of water lifting by means of the wheels spinning from the water stream. This way, the Assyrians could irrigate their land plots and bring in a rich harvest. But the economic situation in the Soviet Union changed for the worse. It became hard and expensive to provide the products. This was the reason the Assyrians got involved in stock breeding.
далеко перец, это, так сказать, привело к тому, что ушли от этого люди, бросили заниматься овощеводством и перешли на вот скотоводство.
Urmia cemetery is near the village. Several generations of Urmian Assyrians rest here. Among them are the names of many still remembered by not only Urmians, but other Russian Assyrians. Assyrians have always had a chapel in the area of the cemetery. The walls of the large glorious new church are being erected near the village cemetery. The church is being built with the support of Pavel Ivyazov. Who is from Urmia originally, but now lives in Armavir. Pavel is a highly regarded man in Armavir and has a large family. His sons are married to Assyrian women. The atmosphere in his family is full of love, warmth, and respect towards their national traditions. His 4 grandchildren are back from school. The whole family is gathered at the dinner table. The children know how to count and pray in Assyrian. In the village of Afibsky, near Krasnodar, Assyrians are engaged in small trades and the cultivation of greenhouse plants, like vegetables and flowers. Almost everyone owns a plot of land. In the summer, they work at the seaside selling produce that they have cultivated themselves for the tourists. Many are involved in the small-scale fisheries. Solak Simyolov is the first man to have built a house here. Later, his brothers joined him with their families, as well as many Assyrians from the Armenian village of Upper Dvin. Today, roughly 45 Assyrian families live in the town of Afibsky. This exemplary household signboard stands at the house of Mikhail Ivanov. Though Mikhail does not have a Slavic background, he is known as Pushkin among his compatriots. He is originally from the former Assyrian village of Kozlazar Dimitrov, which is in Armenia. He has lived in Diskaya for 15 years. Mikhail's household is indeed excellent. Everything is clean, and the place is neat. In the evenings, his Assyrian neighbors often gather here. They have many things in common to discuss. They are all Assyrians who have come from other former Soviet republics. This is the city of Novorossiysk. Stretched across the azure shores of the Black Sea. Novorossiysk is a seaport with a busy routine life. Today is a weekday. Everyone is busy at work. The police officer is conducting his official duties. It's not hard to discover his nationality. His appearance proves him to be a typical Assyrian. During the 1970s, there were only a small number of Assyrian families living in the city of Krymsk in the Krasnodar territory. After the 1990s, a number of Assyrians from the Armenian village of Arzhny joined their relatives in Krymsk. Many moved here also from Azerbaijan. Upon their arrival in the Russian Federation, they had problems with gaining legal residence registration. But those hard times are behind them now, and today the Assyrian community is one of the most organized and closely knit communities of Krymsk, encompassing nearly 300 Assyrian families. Krymsk's Assyrian community and the city administration maintain good relations. Alexander Khramov, the head of the Krymsk mayoralty, is a newcomer. He understands the Assyrian immigrants because he has also had similar problems in the past. They share common thoughts and ideas, and this is a testimony to the solid relationship between Khramov's administration and the Assyrian community.
Считаю, что очень хорошие, порядочные люди, знающие люди, образованные, и они могут...
I think they are good and educated people. They are helpful and important to the village or city they inhabit. For half a year, I have never had a problem with the Assyrian people. We have never had an issue where we would disagree with each other. It is easy to work with them. Let them be healthy and live here and work with us.
У нас были диаметрально противоположные точки зрения. Мне с ними легко работать, и я считаю, что они находятся на своем месте, и дай Бог им здоровья, пусть живут у нас и вместе совместно с нами трудятся.
We were so happy to hear the children speak in Assyrian here. Unfortunately, it is not the same with other regions of Russia. The community has a dance ensemble made up of various age groups. present at the performance by the Children's Ensemble, professionally demonstrating Assyrian national dances. It seems impossible to stop this little girl as she has submerged herself in her role. Manya is singing at dinner. All her relatives have gathered for a traditional meal. It is a large family, and at the head is the grandfather. Dinner consists of Assyrian dishes. The Assyrians' traditional and favorite meal, bushala, is the special centerpiece of the table. Bushala is a soup made of cabbage, parsley, chard, grains of wheat, and pepper in a yogurt base. Within this ordinary Assyrian family, the national characteristics are reflected: hospitality and love and respect for their neighbors and traditions. It appears that the Assyrian community of Krymsk, under the leadership of Walter Veniaminov, has no major problems to solve any longer. However, they have always lacked a place for pilgrimage, an occasion rooted within village culture in the past when families would visit a particular saint's monastery or church on his name day. Outside Krymsk lies the most revered place for the local Christian population, the Russian Orthodox sanctuary called St. River. It attracts thousands of Christians. Many legends and parables are connected with its healing spring. The Assyrians join together with other Christians and come to this pilgrimage site and perform a traditional dukhrana, or animal sacrifice to God. A stone has been brought from Matmariam Church, located in their native village of Arzhny, to set into the foundation for the new place of worship that is being erected in Krymsk. The Krymsk Assyrians plan to build the church on their own.
هیویت لنخنا بعد خمرة شوك من عمره خنا بيا جورتا دوچا عويران إيشت المديان شامس زام خدوياي ومندي خينا ماور وهم هذا هيويت لان عمره بانخ قاشب تعويلان قدين رابا لازم لخاجنز ملباند لشان ديان لشان يماية خينا مارن اخنا نشولت اخوانتان لقد امتان لا بربزة لا بشرة وهيويت لان اتخدبتو يا
The portrait photograph of Patriarch Mar Shimon Benjamin, killed in 1918, hangs in many Assyrian houses and is revered as the memory of a national hero. Generations later, Mar Shimon remains in the hearts of his people as a unique and incomparable spiritual father of Assyrian people. Russian by nationality, Galina Kurochkina has lived half her life in an Assyrian family. The daughter of an ex-military man, she married an Assyrian and lived in the Armenian village of Arsny for many years. She was challenged by language barriers in the village. Moreover, she was disliked by her father-in-law. Over time, Galina entered into the Assyrian lifestyle. Her family has lived in Krimsk for several years. She considers her family Assyrian and loves to repeat a saying she inherited from her father-in-law. Happiness in the family can only be achieved through understanding, not words.
من بيتا جو بيتا همزمان وايدا أنا تنوين أخنان سويدا مدرانا тенин она ляпель джухею почти что я 19-летняя попала в село, почти большую часть жизни я прожила среди ассирийского народа. Мои дети ассирийцы, мои внуки, правнуки, у всех же течет ассирийская кровь. Я, наоборот, всегда детям говорю, никогда не забывайте свой язык, никогда не забывайте свою родину, своих родителей, свои корни.
Here is another example of respect to other nations and their traditions. The Tumasov family lives in Krasnodar city. Ida Tumasova, an Ossetian woman, has been married to an Assyrian for more than 10 years. For a non-native Assyrian, Ida Tumasova speaks her adopted language with exceptional clarity.
أنا جانية ستينكوان من Vladikavkaz بد 15 سنة بخاين جف سيرا and لبلي لشانم إتليانت ويا سور خبراتا برونا.
Ossetian people have their own rich traditions and strict morals. Maybe this fact makes Tumasova respect and observe traditions of other nations, particularly her husband's people. Assyrian people have always cherished the role of the mother, an integral part of their culture. Many poems and songs are dedicated to Yima, mother. The use of national motifs is characteristic of the paintings of Chekolov Ivanov. But the mother figure is particularly emphasized in his works. The unmistakable face of the mother is portrayed in this painting, where the artist has glorified all the features embodied in Assyrian mothers: beauty, poetry, longing, and depth. The city of Rostov-on-Don. For almost 150 years, two different towns were situated in the area of modern Rostov-on-Don, Rostov and Nakhichevan-on-Don. The favorable geographic position of Rostov, located at the crossroads of waterways and roadways, boosted the city's economic development. Rostov was called a merchant city, as its chief economic strength lay trade. Today, Rostov, situated on the right bank of the Don River, is one of the largest cities of the Russian Federation. Nearly 3,000 Assyrians dwell in the Rostov region. Many of them moved here in the 1990s, predominantly from the Armenian village of Koilazar Dimitrovo. The Assyrian Regional National Cultural Autonomy of Rostov have been active for 10 years. It aims at uniting the Assyrian population in the region. They also have a Sunday school, where students learn the Assyrian language. The organization established a national ensemble, Chedyuta, happiness, which often participates in festive events held by the region's national minorities. Assyrians of Rostov give honor and respect to one particular man, whom they regard their leader. This man is the founding organizer and contributor to the Assyrian community. His compatriots refer to him simply as Kostya. For others, he is Kostya Assyrian. Konstantin Alaverdov has reason to be proud of his background. His ancestor is Alaverdi Bartuma, who led the migration of Persia's Assyrian population to eastern Armenia after the Russian-Persian War of 1826-28. At that time, about 100 Assyrian families left Iran's Urmia area under the terms of the Treaty of Turkmenchai that allowed a proportion of Assyrians and Armenians to depart Iran. Kostya pays regular visit to his native village in Armenia and the graves of his ancestors. Members of the Nikolaevs family have been musicians for generations. Unfortunately, only Tamara today continues the musical activity of her father and brother. His father Melik Nikolaev made a significant contribution to the development of Assyrian folk music. The entire song lyrics of her father is collected in this notebook.
Now I can sing such a song. This is my father's notebook. He designed it himself. These are my brothers, Pyotr, Georgy, cousin Alexander, and Dad. Pyotr played tad. Georgy finished the musical college and played accordion. Alexander played drums. My dad played kemancha and sang. That's the story. I, too, can sing.
Я сама тоже пою. Коль дукях дыри, лякама хазянух, мадылычет военных хазянух. Коль дукях дыри, лякама хазянух, мадылычет военных хазянух. Рабемен тахмуни, моди одана, лябди юхуну, силам санахамяна. Рабемен тахмуни, моди одана, лябди юхуну, силам санахамяна.
The Don Cossack community has a great influence and power in the region. Many researchers offer various theories on the Cossack origins. One of them is that the Cossacks are a united population with a distinct way of life, traditions, and culture. In Shakhta city, local Assyrians and Cossacks enjoy friendly relations.
Здесь, будем так говорить, по мере возможностей, встречаясь с лидерами диаспор,
within the limits of the possible, here we get together with the leaders of the diaspora. The leaders of the diaspora, too, invite us practically to every forum or conference they hold, and the Assyrian New Year celebration. We also invite our children, and together we learn the ancient culture peculiar to the Assyrians and Armenians. As we know, these two nations have ancient history. So we explore each other's traditions and way of life. Every possible tradition of the Assyrians and our people is the clot of the culture that ascends to a new qualitative level. I think the nations around the world only benefit from this.
восходит, и я думаю, всем от этого, всем нациям, народностям от этого только плюс и люба, да?
Assyrians remember the support they received from the Cossacks when they arrived in Russia as refugees during World War I. Many refugees would not have survived without the help of the Cossack army. Assyrian worshippers, along with others, attend the Russian Orthodox Church, named Protection of the Virgin, in the city of Shakhta. There is still an Assyrian community in the city. A warm relationship was established between the local Orthodox clergymen and the Assyrian community. Many are family friends.
Сегодня здесь своей национальной церкви, василицы здесь в России нет, но все они христиане, они помнят в своих корнях.
Today, Assyrian people do not have a national church in Russia, but they are all Christians. They never forget their backgrounds. That is why the Russian Orthodox Church is deeply venerated by Assyrians. They come here for divine services and feasts, to light a candle, pray to the Lord, and I'm sure God will certainly listen to their prayers.
The main concern of the Shakhta Assyrian organization is teaching Assyrian history and language. An agreement was made between the spiritual administration of the church and the community to have lessons twice a week at the church. Unfortunately, in many large cities, the intense assimilation of Assyrian people is inevitable. Assyrians do not speak their native language anymore. The younger generations integrate into the modern life of the cities where they live. National backgrounds, history, and traditions seem old-fashioned and disappear over time. The love for the nation is limited to traditional festivals, celebrated through parties and dances in modern interpretation.
Культура держит, является инъекцией против ассимиляции. Знание национальной истории, национального языка, национальной литературы – это то лекарство, которое, так сказать, это антибиотик против ассимиляции.
Culture is a kind of injection against assimilation. The knowledge of national history, language, and literature is the very medication, rather antibiotic against assimilation. If we want to slow down this process of assimilation, we should make our young people to love their national history and be interested in the Assyrian language and certainly the national culture. Mothers should sing lullabies to their children in the Assyrian language. Tell them Assyrian fables, bring them up with certain Assyrian traditions. We can certainly reach this goal in modern conditions of life.
Растила бы его в каких-то традициях ассирийства. И это в современных условиях очень достижимо.
These young Assyrians of Rostov tried to find ways to preserve their national traditions. Each of them has his own viewpoint on this issue. Many Assyrian families expect assimilation and take measures to prevent it. They believe that the recognition and preservation of national backgrounds begin in the family. National identity, creeds, and emotions must be taught within the family. For Pavel Mushalov, Don is his second homeland. He wants his children and the whole community under his leadership to live here. He has his own methods and principles to preserve the national identity in his family.
Мы переехали в Россию, у меня было 8 лет. И, в принципе, мне не с кем было общаться на своем родном языке, и я сам как бы частично знаю...
We came to Russia. I was 8 then. There was no one to speak Assyrian with. I only know my mother language partly, which doesn't please me at all. That is why I want my sons to marry Assyrians, no matter where they will be from, Russia, Iran, or Iraq. My main goal is to have daughters-in-law speaking the Assyrian language, so that my grandchildren can learn Assyrian from their parents and speak it.
И могли научиться от своих родителей свой собственный язык.
It is the left bank of Don River. The Assyrian ensemble, Hadyuta, is excitedly performing the favorite national dance of Sheikhani. In this part of our documentary, we would like to speak about Assyrians in Russia, but realizing the enormous scale of this subject, we will cover only a few Assyrians' activities, as our compatriots are scattered throughout numerous cities and regions within the vast Russian Federation. Assyrians in Russia live singly or with their families. Very often, profession reasons or destiny forces them to abandon their families and communities to live in places where their nationality and history are unrecognized. Regardless of their professions, many Assyrians do discover their backgrounds at some point in life and research the history of their nation. Over the past few years, a number of books on the history of Assyrians in Russia, their language and religion, have been published. Assyrian entrepreneurs decorate their restaurants, cafes, and hotels with ancient Assyrian symbols and ornamentation based on the bas reliefs of Assyrian royal palaces. This man is the living legend of the Assyrian people, Mikhail Sado. His contribution to the development of the native language and culture is enormous. His parents were refugees who fled from the Hakkari region of the Ottoman Empire. After World War I, they moved to Leningrad, present-day St. Petersburg. His family endured every kind of disaster that befell the Assyrian nation: genocide, flight, hunger, the Soviet repressions, and collapse. His grandfather, the pastor Kasha Ishak, was shot in 1938. His father, Mikhail Sado, was arrested at that time. After serving his first sentence, he was arrested again in 1948. Mikhail Sado is a Semitologist by profession. In the 1960s, he formed a party with other young Orientalists aimed at reviving Russia and returning to the abandoned Orthodox Christian values. This secret group was called All Russian Social Christian Union for the Liberation of the Nation, because they were against the prevailing communist ideology. Its members were soon arrested. Mikhail was sentenced to 13 years in the Siberian labor camps. The goal of our actions was to involve all the honest people we had met in our life in the Christian cultural activity of our organization. Mikhail Sado later wrote about the group's activities while serving his sentence in the labor camp. Sado compiled a Russian-Assyrian dictionary based upon the Assyrian text of the Bible. In 1988, a Soviet ideology was becoming less strident. The Spiritual Academy of St. Petersburg invited Sado to work as a professor. At the time, Rabbi Mikhail founded a private school for Assyrians. During the 1980s, he initiated the Assyrian National Cultural Movement in the USSR. Over the past few years, Professor Sado had been working on his new book about the Assyrians who took part in the Great Patriotic War. And he did research on Assyrians who became victims of Stalin's repressions. He travels a lot across the country, restoring names and collecting supporting materials. Young people eagerly assist him. They are proud of their teacher and are always happy to help and to learn new things from Rabbi Mikhail.
البت جري كمرن قد رابس بايوة قاتن كتيالا وبناتا أمصيبة أبي ولا إيصورة من كل ترايت كل الدنيا قد أنا ترايتي نبلاخة جو سوريا جو إيراق جو أمريكا جو يوروب جريك أميها هاويلان إيصورة قد أخنخ بريش لاهوخ من ترايوتتي لفدر من دعت رديا هاوخ يالت خا أمتا هلبت أمتن اتلا بريشوتا حكمة شوطة بالحكمة أطوراية وسورياية وكلداية إنا لا نبلغ بر دنهي مزمانة أختيتها قد كلن خايوة خا أما خا مردوتا وخا تفضيتا وآها من دي قاتن رابا واجبي
His mission is serving God and his parishioners. His life is a prayer. This man is a Russian Orthodox priest, Father Stefan Sado, the abbot of the Alexandro Nevsky Monastery of St. Petersburg. He is also the head of St. Petersburg Spiritual Academy's library. His research and works relate to the Assyrians and the Russian Orthodox mission in Urmia, Iran prior to the Russian Revolution. For many years, he collected data about Assyrians in Russia, who in some way contributed to the development of cultural life during the mid-19th and 20th centuries. This enormous work by Stefan Sado is called Materials on the Biographic Dictionary of Assyrians in Russia. Yakov Ivanovich Alexanov was born in 1937. His family was very poor and lived in a village of Urmia. His father died during the Great Patriotic War, leaving behind his mother and his two siblings. Being the eldest among his siblings, young Yakov had to grow up quickly. During wartime, children were deprived of many common joys, but his brightest memories are connected with his childhood. The atmosphere of kindness and understanding that permeated the village, where everyone lived in a traditional manner.
In the mornings, neighbors greeted each other in Assyrian. Inquired about each other's health.
Встречали утро, спрашивали, здоровы ли все. Практически у нас в селе...
During the 1940s, practically no one in our village locked the door of his house or had bars on the windows like today.
Не то чтобы на окнах решетки были, как сейчас. Проживали дружно, жили, там много наций было.
We lived peacefully together, though the village inhabited different nationalities. I always remember our childhood, the kindness and exactingness of our elders. For example, if our cow milked less, others would support us with milk. If they baked bread, we, the children, would be given bread. Before we got to school, we turned aside and met them. They fed us with what they had. It happened mostly in cold winters, so that we could get to school.
Уже в школу пошел первый, второй, третий классы. Так пока до школы доходили, мы в 2-3 двора, это было как общепринято. Мы заворачивали там, и нас они встречали, подкармливали чем могли, особенно в холодное время, чтобы мы дошли до школы.
Yakov's mother was illiterate and dreamt that one day her son would have an education. Years later, her dream mostly came true, but at that time there was a war and Stalin's repressions. Yakov was only 12 when his mother was arrested. The children were left alone. With the efforts of his teacher, Yakov wrote a letter to Stalin explaining the situation his family was facing. One night, a government courier knocked on the door and handed Yakov the answer to his letter from Stalin. Yakov Alexanov is 70 years old now and is the advisor to the head of the Legislative Council of Krasnodar Territory. He has held many leadership positions and has been awarded numerous state prizes. During the course of his life, he has always tried to treat people the way the old Assyrians once did in Urmia village.
Это были очень добродушные отношения наших дедов, моего деда Сердис.
Those relations of our grandfathers were kind, and that very kindness of my elder generation reflected on my character.
И других. Вот эта доброта старшего поколения, оно отразилось на мне на всю жизнь.
Working in Russia, I am very grateful that I was born here, that Russia sheltered my grandfather and father, who were immigrants from Turkey. The revolutionary events of 1917 forced them to wander and later settle in Urmia. I am grateful to fate. We, the children, didn't know where we were born, where our parents lived. We got the rest here, got educated, and found work. While at work, I try to treat people the way my grandfathers and grandmothers did in the Urmia village of Krasnodar territory.
Вспоминаю и отношусь, пытаюсь к людям относиться так, как мои дедушки, бабушки, наши старики, ветераны этого села Урмия Краснодарского края.
This is Murmansk, the capital of the world transpolar zone. The city was founded in 1916. The main geographic feature of Murmansk is its polar nights and days. From the end of May through the end of July, the sun shines constantly. While from December until mid-January, it is always polar nights. For the past several years, Sergei Gevargizov has conducted the Murmansk Philharmonic Orchestra. He is Assyrian by heritage and an honored tenor vocalist and vocal teacher in Russia. Gevargizov was born in Armenia and moved to Murmansk in 1988 with his wife, Rosalia, a philharmonic soloist. One of Gevargizov's dreams is to open a school for talented Assyrian children to learn singing, classical music, drawing, and other arts. For this purpose, he is collaborating with a small Assyrian community in Australia and continues to work towards his goal. Gevargizov has performed a large and diverse repertoire, but his passion is for the works of Italian composers and spiritual music of ancient masters. For the cultural programs devoted to the 2000 Summer Olympics, he toured a number of cities in Russia, Scandinavia, and Australia. In that same year, Gevargizov began an educational program at the Murmansk Philharmonic called Classical Musical Art for Our Children. Within the framework of this program, more than 300 concerts have been held for young children and students at kindergartens and schools.
Не спеши. Больше восточности. Мелизмети. Хашуглина блення задра. Нинве маликта брита. Como la sarbal mal gabra. Hechagella la ruchi shurshita. Shugel kharabi ya gyarge. Benyada dige. Kaimudan mashka.
Ты меня на рассвете разбудишь, проводить необутая выйдешь. Ты меня никогда не забудешь. Ты меня никогда не увидишь. Заслонишь тебя от простуды, я подумаю, Боже Всевышний, я тебя никогда не забуду. Я тебя никогда не увижу.
If I had lived in Urmia village, I would speak my native language, says Alexander Sado, an actor of the Lancome Theater and an honored artist in Russia. The award for honored artist in Russia is given to those who make outstanding contributions to theater, animation, and entertainment. Sado explains his cultural connection through historical events. Sado began his artistic career in a Moscow rock group called Araks.
появились тогда спектакли в 1976 году.
The hard opera Star and Death of Joachim Murieta was performed in 1976. Everything there is basically played in hard rock. Besides that performance, we also played Avtograd 21 to the accompaniment of Arax Group. In 1979, Arax left the theater, but I continued working for the theater and together with Chris Kelmy and other musicians, founded a group called Rock Atelier.
As a professional musician, he thinks that it would be fascinating to listen to new approaches of R&B in Assyria.
Ассирийские песни слышишь только на свадьбах. В исполнении ассирийских музыкантов практически одно и то же.
Assyrian songs today can be heard only at wedding parties performed by Assyrian singers, which is almost the same thing. Though there was an exception, it was 40 years ago. An Assyrian female singer recorded a song. I remember the music very well. I think the record was released in Georgia. As I said, it was 40 years ago.
Там далилоло, это было 40 лет назад. А потом где-то лет
Then there was another one about 20 years ago, which I remember well. It was probably sung by an Iranian group.
Тоже мне запомнилось.
I just remembered that song. The music differed in its non-standard rhythm of drums.
С барабаном. Если новые ассирийцы, музыканты что-то придумают,
if new Assyrian musicians make non-traditional music in R&B or so, it will be interesting to be sung in the Assyrian language.
Это интересно будет послушать на ассирийском языке.
That is his wish and advice to young Assyrian musicians. As an actor, Sasha has played in the performances of Til, The Star and the Death of Joaquin Muriet, People and Birds, My Expectations, and Vabank, To Stake Everything. But the major performance of his life is Unona and Avos.
В 1981 году уже Рыбников принес.
In 1980, Rybnikov showed me his work, the rock opera Unona and Avos, and I recorded the music. The disc was released before the performance. The premiere of the performance was in 1981. So we have worked together on Unona and Avos for almost 27 years.
For more than 25 years, Sado performed the leading vocal roles.
Ты меня никогда не увидишь, заслонивши тебя от простуды. Я подумаю, Боже Всевышний, я тебя никогда не забуду, я тебя никогда не увижу. Кусочек, просили кусочек.
Sado also does voices in animated films, such as The Dog Booted and Paradoxes in Rock.
Я обрусевший ассириец.
I am a bold Assyrian. My homeland is here, Russia. I was born in Russia. If I need to say something in Assyrian, I will think a little and say it. My parents spoke Assyrian at home. But we were living in Moscow and spoke Russian practically all the time. We understand Assyrian, but we need some time to collect our thoughts if we want to express them in Assyrian.
Все понимаем, но чтобы составить фразу на ассирийском, надо подумать, а потом сказать. Иногда задают вопросы те люди.
Sometimes people ask me what nationality I am. When I answer it, the next question follows, who are the Assyrians? The answer for this is very simple. They are normal people, but without a homeland and state. Being scattered around the world, they cannot unite anymore.
В свое время. И до сих пор соединиться не могут. Вот.
The creativity of sculptor Yuri Gibraev is famous not only in Russia, but also overseas. His works stand in several cities across Russia. Many of his sculptures have been displayed in exhibitions throughout his long artistic career. Gibraev enjoys the portrait genre the most. The Assyrian subject plays a considerable role in his works. Among them are the portraits of Saint Yefrem the Syrian, hymn writer John of Damask, father and son of Gibraev, and seminary student Mikhail Sado. The stunning monument, the Assyrian Passional, stands out particularly among his recent works. It is located in the Levashov Cemetery in memory of the Assyrians executed during Stalin's repressions. For his great contribution to Russia's fine arts in 2007, Gibraev was awarded the title of Honored Painter. Assyrians traditionally are fond of very physical sports, particularly of freestyle wrestling, boxing, and soccer. This love may be explained by their character mentality and the free spirit of the nation. Assyrian masters and champions of various sports today live in every former Soviet republic and Russia as well. This modest Assyrian has been a kickboxer for 22 years. Many of Artur Yakubov's medals and prize cups result from his stubborn and painstaking trainings. Yakubov is a multiple champion of Russia, prize winner in international competitions, champion of the Commonwealth of Independent States, and five-time champion of Southern Russia. Now he is preparing for new competitions. Undoubtedly, new medals will enrich his collection of prizes.
Я помню, значит, мама моя, она меня держала на руках.
I remember my mother held me in her arms. We were watching a war film in one of the movie theaters in Yerevan. The film showed Hitler. I can't remember what Hitler was exactly doing in the film. Suddenly, a military man, who was also watching the film, took out his gun and shot at the screen. I turned and saw his green service cap. He was a frontier guard. When I asked my mom if he was allowed to shoot at the screen, she said he had the right to do it because he was a military man.
This occasion remained a strong memory. Yeska Ivanov's father, Ivan Ivanov, from the Armenian village of Koilasar, studied at the Assyrian department of the Armavir Pedagogical College together with his wife Sarah. In 1939, he joined the army and was killed during World War II. He was a senior lieutenant. When he was young, Yeska Ivanov decided to become a military man. While growing up, he firmly believed he would become a pilot. The aviation college, he was told, "We are the select." At that time, such a profession was considered extremely dangerous. He started his career as a lieutenant. At first, he commanded small units and gradually, through experience, was put in command of much larger military units. After having served in Akhtubinsk from 1961 to 1996, he went into retirement. The Assyrian national character was emphasized throughout his entire military career. He was always proud of and treasured his profession. Armen Ivanov followed his father's footsteps. He is the first-class pilot and cannot imagine his life without the sky and aircraft.
It is such an unusual feeling when you are in the air. It's hard to express how you feel it. You have to feel it on your own. Just imagine that you are flying like a bird. You are flying the way you want, up and down the earth.
He graduated from Tambov Higher Military Aviation College for pilots. A lieutenant colonel and commander of airplanes, Armen serves at the Chakalov State Test Flight Center located in the city of Akhtubinsk. He pilots AN-24, 26, and 72 airplanes. When traveling by plane in his childhood, little Armen was always fascinated with the pilot's cabin. Once he was even allowed to enter the cabin crew, observe the pilot and control column.
Я помню еще в детстве, когда летал с родителями к себе на родину, в Армению, в Ереван, если я находился поблизости с кабиной пилотов, и дверь была приоткрыта.
I remember when I was a small kid. We flew to my homeland Armenia with my parents. Every time I was near the pilot's cabin and its door was open, the cabin seemed to be an altar to me. It was thrilling for me to watch the cabin, and I always wanted to be there. At the first opportunity, I would come up to the pilot and ask him for permission to enter the cabin and stay there with him until the end of the flight.
Весь полет до самой посадки. Меня это все завораживало, и с огромнейшим удовольствием это делал, и мне это очень нравилось.
The Ivanov family already has given 3 military generations, but today a different life and different dreams are entering the family history. Armen Ivanov's son wants to become a banker. Somewhere in a large bustling city walks an old man with his grandson, trying to teach him the words coming straight from his heart and soul, the words that come out of every Assyrian heart, the words that are still incomprehensible to the grandson, but already as warm and native as their distant homeland, Assyria. At the dawn of the 21st century, Assyrians are spread around the globe. They live in America, Europe, Australia, Iraq, and the Middle East, as well as in the vast territory of the Russian Federation, from Siberia to Murmansk, from the north to the south. Somewhere in the diverse cities of Russia walks a dark-haired man with dark eyebrows. Who knows, maybe his ancestors were Maleks or common farmers in their homeland. Or maybe this man is an offspring of a shoeblack, who at one time, in spite of rainy cold weather, would sit at a St. Petersburg bridge humming a heartbreaking song about his native land, so distant and so cherished.